and welcome to season 2 of the Phoenix Rising podcast. I am super excited for season 2. I honestly didn't even know if there was going to be a season 2, but the pattern that I have is that right around this time, end of January, beginning of February, it's almost like it feels like momentum is building up. And obviously, like, it's the new year, so that's a lot of people. But I have just learned that some of my biggest projects and new beginnings and like where I really gain a lot of traction is in the beginning of the year. So I was waiting. I finished out season 1 December, a couple months ago with the top lessons from 2021. And I left it there just kind of deciding, like, do I want to do another season? How do I feel about this? And honestly, like, I really enjoy the feedback that I get from you guys. I enjoy the emails and the messages, just of how much you guys are learning about your nutrition, about mindset, about your own health and fitness goals, and just your life goals. So this is episode 1 of season 2. I actually have no idea what the actual episode number is. So we're just starting with number 1 of season 2. So many things going on for so many people. I feel like in order to start this new season, there's a little bit of a recap and overview, and then we can dive into today's topic, which is to supplement or not to supplement. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is because obviously New Year's weight loss goals, nutrition goals, people have high ambitions for wanting to get in the best shape. And one of the first things they do is they start going out and buying a bunch of supplements. That's always the first thing everybody thinks is the solution to their problem. And it's not necessarily that supplementation is bad, but there are some very important things to take into consideration. And we'll cover all of this so that you can make the best decision for your health and your body, and then decide what you need from there. Part of this, though, is I was actually in DC, Washington, DC earlier this week. What is today? It's Friday. So I was in DC Monday to Wednesday night and got back. I was actually giving some nutrition help and advice and performance mindset coaching to some very high political people who had reached out looking for help with motivation and mindset. So I flew up there on Monday, came back Wednesday night, totally exhausted from just spending so much time with like motivating people and mindset type coaching. And actually, I'm totally kidding. I wasn't with any high political people or doing any performance coaching or anything like that. I just wanted to see if you were paying attention. But I really was in DC earlier this week for something totally different. However, part of the reason for doing this podcast episode on supplementation is because I had a lot of conversations with people about supplements and nutrition. And I had my own little personal experience that I'll share with you, where I did need to use supplements to help me out. So here's what happened is, other than I've gotten a lot of messages. So 2 things. One, I was getting really frustrated because while I was in DC, obviously, like most people, when you travel and you're on the go, you don't really have the same access to real food, like whole food all the time. So when you're at an airport, I'm walking through all the little like metro shops that are inside the DC airport and finding, of course, like Chex Mix and Cheez-Its and Snicker bars and all these things. And I'm really frustrated because I can't find anything that like is actually what I need. All I wanted was like a clean source of protein and some carbohydrates. So I had posted on Instagram while I was in DC. I walked into this supplement shop, made like a quick stop got an Uber. I was like, I just need to go to like a vitamin shop or like a nutrition shop or something. If I can just find like single packets of protein powder that I can put in oats in the morning, or if I can find something, but like I cannot keep snacking on just this crap all the time, because I can tell, like, when you get to know your body well enough, you can just tell when you're under fueled and if your body needs more carbs, fats, or protein. So I go into this nutrition store and it's just loaded with bars and meal replacements and protein powders. And I'm like, oh, thank God. Like, I can get some electrolytes and I can get like what I need. And then I'm going to feel so much better, especially when traveling and you want to like make sure your immune system is up. So I go to this supplement store, and a lot of you guys saw this on Instagram, and you were responding with questions about supplements and nutrition, but also making fun of me because I was that girl in the shop, which is why I'm doing this. So I'm in there, And I'm looking at all their protein bars and I'm like starting to get pissed off because it's like, nope, sucralose, yellow food coloring, artificial dyes and sweeteners, not eating that. Nope, not doing this. That's basically plastic inside this bar. So I did this video on Instagram, basically standing on my soapbox of like, hey, FYI, just because you're buying stuff from a nutrition and health food store does not necessarily mean it's healthy. And I was educating you guys in a very small dose of like 30 seconds of like, here's an ingredient list on the Quest bar and on the MRE bar and Power Crunch bars and all these bars that are like top sellers in your nutrition shops. And I was like, here's what you need to look for. Like, watch out for all the sugar alcohols. Watch out for the aspartame and the sucralose. Watch out for the quote unquote enriched flour because it doesn't really mean anything other than they stripped the flour of the important nutrients. So I was posting all that stuff and I got so annoyed. I didn't end up buying anything because I couldn't find something. And the person at the store like came over and they were like, can I help you find something? You seem like you're looking for something specific. I see you reading the ingredient list. And me being that person, I was like, yeah, actually, maybe you can. Do you have anything that is natural, that doesn't have sucralose, artificial flavors, colors and dyes? Like it's just food. And she looked at me and she's like, oh, actually, in bars, no. I was like, what about protein powder? Do you have a protein powder that doesn't have artificial flavors or plastic preservatives or anything like that? And she's like, oh, no, now that you mention it, she's like, we have a vegan protein that might be natural, which is a whole other thing. Like vegan, I have no problem with vegan. It's just you have to take 2 times the amount of vegan protein to equal what your body absorbs in whey protein. For those of you who didn't know that, if you take 50 grams of vegan protein, it equivalates to about 25 grams of what your body absorbs in whey protein. So you have to take twice as much in order to absorb half of what you would in the whey form. So anyways, I went on a rant with that and posted it on Instagram. And a lot of you guys were sending me messages of like, oh, I didn't know to like even look for that. I didn't know what this means. And what about this? And what about that? So I wanted to do this whole talk on to supplement or not to supplement and how you can really educate yourself to make the best decision for that. So on that note, that wasn't really an intro. That was kind of just like rambling about my rant and how annoyed I get with that stuff. But if you do need help, and we'll talk about this more later of why this is important, if you want specific help with nutrition coaching and figuring out what's best for your body, then set up a call with me. Go to ashleydrummonds.com. There's 400 different buttons you can click in order to do that. So you'll see that. Also, the link will be in the description to this podcast episode. So again, if you want specific help with nutrition, go to ashleydrummonds.com and you will see all the options of how you can do that with me, where we can talk about things. So the second part of this with nutrition and supplementation, and the other reason I wanted to talk about this is, so I'll just totally, you guys know that I have no problem, like full transparency, putting myself out there. So I hadn't flown in a really long time. Like I think the last time I flew was beginning of 2020, and I flew up to New York City to see my brother and hang out with him for a little bit. And no, like I've traveled, I just hadn't flown in a while. And I was a little bit nervous about flying out of the Orlando airport. One, because I hate the Orlando airport. It is by far, if you've ever flown out of the Orlando airport, it is literally the equivalent of going to the busiest theme park and standing in line for a ride just to get through security. Like I hate it so much. So it gives me intense anxiety knowing I have to go to the Orlando airport to get through security. And it's like in my mind, from a mindset perspective, when I'm going in, I'm like, all right, all you got to do is get through this line. Just get through the line, get to the other side. It's going to be okay. And it's so bad that they actually have a time posted at the top of the security thing of your estimated wait time, just like you're at a theme park. And it was 48 minutes in line. And this thing went through the main security section, and it was so long, it was like down one of the terminals. So as soon as I walk in, I'm like, oh shit. Like I can already tell, like one, being super highly sensitive and empathic, like I just pick up on so many things as it is. So the worst thing is to put me in an environment where I don't want to say unaware people, But basically, when you have people who are self-aware, meaning they're aware of their own energy, they're aware of their own thoughts and patterns, when you're around people like that, it actually feels fine. And so here's a game you can play with yourself. We're kind of like going off on a rabbit trail, but it's fine. So somebody who does their own emotional work, somebody who processes their issues, somebody who takes the time to work through whatever is going on mentally, physically, and emotionally. Okay. Somebody who is self-aware. When you are around people like that, it doesn't feel draining. It doesn't feel overwhelming. It just feels normal. It's an equal energy exchange. Sometimes it might actually make you feel elevated. It might make you feel really good because there's a match in energy and you're just like, God, I feel so good when I'm around this person, or I feel so calm. It's because they have clean, clear, light energy that just like lights up things and makes you feel great. So there's that version. However, that's like a small percent of our population. 90% of our population doesn't deal with anything. They don't deal with their crap. They don't talk about anything, and they just shove all their emotional energy down, or they project it onto other people. So if you are like me, somebody who is hyper self-aware, the pros of being like that and being highly sensitive and all that is that you can work through a lot of your emotional and mental issues quickly. However, it also makes you hypersensitive to people who do not deal with their issues. So what it can feel like, and in this situation, and I promise this all ties together, in this situation, you put me at a Disney theme park with like 300 people who are clueless about emotional space, energetic energy, their own self-awareness. And it feels like being thrown into a public swimming pool and everybody's peeing in the pool, except for you were really clean before you got in. And you're like, oh my God, get me out of the pool. Like, this is so dirty and gross. That's kind of what it feels like for me going to the Orlando airport, of like, it's very overwhelming. And it feels like getting put in the same big bubble of energy with people who it's like a clash. It's like an energetic clash. And I don't really know how else to explain it. Okay. The way this manifests for me physically is I will get extreme anxiety and fatigue, and it comes out of nowhere. So like, I'll feel totally fine. And like the drive out there, I felt so like calm and peaceful and relaxed, which makes total sense because I was in my own energy and everything was great. And then when I get to this place, it's kind of hard to explain it. Like, I'll start to feel dizzy. I start to feel super off. I feel like it's almost like stimulation overload, mental and emotional overload. I don't know. I'm hoping this makes sense. But so when this happens, it's really hard for me to be present. And I've told you guys stories about how this happens sometimes. Like if I've gone to a restaurant and the person next to me, like I call it invasive energy. Their energy is just like, so it's a feeling, but the best way I can describe it is it's when the energy is so loud, even though there's nothing being said. It's just like, God, like, I need you to get away from me because like you have such invasive energy that it's like, I can barely hear myself think. So that's how this feels. So physically what happens is my chest tightens. I get extreme like dizziness. Sometimes I get a little nauseous. It really sucks, to be totally honest. So now to tie it all back in, this is the second part for doing this. Supplementation. I've never taken any kind of anti-anxiety medicine in my life, and I have no problem with people who do it. So in situations like this, I do supplement with natural herbs to help kind of like manage the situation as best as possible. And I was talking to somebody about this recently of like, because they were experiencing something similar. And I like literally, it was so weird. We got through the security line, and as soon as we got through the security line, I felt like I was just going to like drop to the ground because my body got so heavy. It got so heavy, felt like I was going to pass out. And it's just, once we got on the plane, I was totally fine. And so they had said they felt the same way. And so there's different herbs, like, and they're adaptogenic herbs. That adaptogenic just means it helps your body better adapt to stressful situations so that it doesn't constantly release cortisol and insulin and all that. It helps your body kind of regulate it. So instead of having such a crazy experience, it just kind of I don't know, it helps take it from like a 10 to a 7. So me being in this situation of like, oh my God, this sucks. Like, I do not want to be here. Like, I seriously feel like I can't breathe right now because this place just feels so heavy. And I took a whole bunch of I can't even say the word now, adaptogenic herbs, which all that is stuff like schisandra berry, lavender oil, holy basil, chamomile, things like that. And it does help. But so it brought up the conversation of, should you supplement or should you not supplement? So on that, now that you've gotten 2 backstories of where all this came from, we're going to talk about whether you should or whether you should not. But before you even get to that point, one of the biggest things you have to take a look at is your nutrition. Nutrition, your emotional state of well-being, all that fun stuff before you go to supplementation. Supplementation can be super beneficial, but you have to understand that's exactly what it is it is a supplement. It is supplementing. It's not meant to take the place of, it's just helping in addition to. So the first thing you take a look at is your overall nutrition. And a lot of times people, for example, we'll talk about anxiety. People who struggle with anxiety or stress or depression or panic disorder or anything like that, first thing that happens is they go to anti-anxiety medications, help with regulating like cortisol, etc. But from a nutrition perspective, the first thing you have to look at is making sure that you're fueling your body and getting enough nutrition, carbohydrates, protein man, am I talking today? Protein intake in order to regulate your cortisol and insulin levels. So usually one of the first things that I look at with clients is I tell them to just track their food in MyFitnessPal for a few days or a week and then send it over to me in detail. I don't care if it's terrible or what it looks like, but because I can see where you might be deficient in some areas and where you might be in a surplus in other areas. And some people who are active, like the first thing people do when they're trying to lose body fat and lose weight is they start going into a deficit, which isn't necessarily wrong. The problem is though, if you go into a macro deficit, so there's calorie deficits and there's macro deficits. When you start to go into a macro deficit to where your carbs are too low, your protein is too low, what happens is your body cannot use the normal food that it would to produce the things like your hormones, your DHEA, serotonin, dopamine, all the normal hormones that keep you functioning regularly and keep your mood well and with recovery and with sleep. It's not getting enough food to be able to do that. So instead, it kind of goes into like a mini starvation mode. And you may start to experience symptoms of like you're not able to fall asleep, or you fall asleep, but you're waking up a lot in the middle of the night, or you have a lot of brain fog, or your muscles aren't recovering, or you're not building muscle fast enough, or you start to notice that you do get extreme anxiety and depression because your cortisol levels are so high. So that's one of the first things you have to look at, is because when your body goes into starvation mode, because it's not getting enough carbs, fat, and protein, it will take those sources and instead it saves, it doesn't necessarily shut off everything else to regulate it, but in a sense it kind of does, because it's like, oh, hey, he or she is not giving us enough nutrition in order to function the way we need to function. So right now we're going to kind of just preserve this stuff, like, all right, maybe they don't sleep well or recover well, but whatever, at least we have enough food in order to function for these other areas. And your body starts to break down your muscle tissue and your immune system in order to fuel properly. The problem is when this happens and people start having symptoms, so they start having all kinds of stuff like I've already mentioned, the first thing they do is they go to start taking supplements because they're like, okay, I can't sleep, then I need to take more melatonin. I'm not building enough muscle, then I need to take creatine, and I need to start using HGH. Plenty of people use HGH, which is a human growth hormone. Don't do that. But you start using all these supplementations instead of addressing the initial factor of, first off, you might not need any of that if you were just eating the right amount of food. And usually you can tell if it's a nutrition issue within 1 to 2 weeks. So carbohydrates is a huge thing. And I'm Personally, I do this all the time, and it's not on purpose. I don't purposely underfuel. It's just sometimes I get so busy that I'll forget, like, oh, dang it, I haven't eaten in 5 hours. And if you have ever seen me when I am underfueled, I literally can't think. It's like my body just like starts to shut down and I need food ASAP. But you get to know your body this way. So first thing you have to look at is nutrition. And for me, being in the industry for so long, one of the most frustrating things is all these macronutrient calculators that are out there. Because there is no calculator that you can put in your height, your weight, and your age, and it's going to tell you the exact macronutrients your body needs. I know this because I played around with those for years, and this was like in my mid-20s, and I would eat exactly like it said, and I wasn't losing any fat, and I actually felt like crap all the time, and my body was so off homeostasis. So a lot of people go do these macro calculators that are really popular, and they're eating it, and they're like, well, why am I not getting any results? Why am I not seeing more muscle? Or why am I not building strength? Why am I still not sleeping well? And it's like, well, because just because this calculator says that, it doesn't take into consideration, like, does your body, there's so many things. See, now I am going on a rant. There's so many things. Well, how old are you? Because that's going to determine your hormone levels too. Guys and girls, how much testosterone do you have? Estrogen, progesterone, DHEA. All that's going to determine if your body can regulate insulin and if it's more sensitive to carbs. The older you get, the more sensitive your body becomes to carbohydrates, such as wheats, breads, pastas, things like that. So you have to get your carbohydrates from sources like fruits and vegetables instead. Things that people don't think about. But on top of that, it's also a matter of your protein intake. It may say, yeah, maybe it says you only need 150 grams for a female or 200 grams for a male. But the question is, how do you feel? Because regardless of a calculator, you may need a lot more than that depending on how busy of a lifestyle you have, how hard you're training, how often you're training, and what your recovery is like. So there's so many factors that go into this. And instead of using a calculator, you can tell. So you can take there's different types of blood work you can do. When you get your annual blood work, and I do this once a year just to check things, looking just at your blood work can show exactly where your nutrition is off. What happens is a lot of people go to traditional doctors, which nothing wrong with traditional doctors. They get their blood work and maybe it says your cholesterol is high, your triglycerides are off, your insulin, your glucose levels are a little bit off, you're vitamin B12 deficient and vitamin D3 deficient. And the first thing that happens is the doctor prescribes you all of these supplements instead of saying, hey, show me what you've been eating for the last week. And more than likely, you might be eating the wrong foods for your specific body that is causing all these deficiencies. So your body is pulling the nutrients out of where it should be in order to give you energy because it can't get it from food. So when I work with clients, I always ask, when's the last time you had blood work? Send me your blood work and I'll take a look at it. And I am not a doctor. I will say that, complete transparency. I'm not a doctor. I just know a lot of stuff because I'm obsessed with this and I've done this for years. But I asked, send me over your nutrition, track it for 7 days. I don't care how bad it is. Send me over your blood work. Send me over the last time you had your hormones tested. And just by looking at that, before you get into supplementation, you can tell, like, all right, so it looks like you have a lot of inflammation. A lot of inflammation usually means that you're underfueled and you're not recovering enough, because when we work out and break our muscles down, that's part of what causes inflammation in the repair and recovery process. It's a good thing, except when you're underfueled and your body can't repair properly, or when you're deficient in certain B vitamins. Well, there's actually a lot of food and nutrition that is packed full of really good B vitamins, or your omegas that are responsible for producing DHEA and normal hormone balances. So there's a lot of stuff to look at. So the first step before you even start doing any kind of supplementation is you get your blood work so that you can see crystal clear and it's not guesswork of what's going on in your body. And then you take a look at your nutrition. And a lot of this is kind of complex just because, like, so for example, for me, one of the things I do supplement with, and it's because I train so hard all the time, is magnesium. Typical recommendation for magnesium is 200 to 400 milligram supplementation a day. Most people can handle that. However, for me, I need like 1,000 to 1,500 milligrams a day. Most people who take that, you might poop your pants all day long because it's a lot of magnesium. However, the problem is magnesium is not something that can be tested. I mean, okay, I'll take that back. It can be tested, but it's not super accurate when it's tested because a lot of your magnesium is stored in your bones and you don't really know you're depleted until you start showing symptoms. And a lot of times when people are magnesium deficient, which FYI, about 40 to 50% of Americans are magnesium deficient. When you are, you can start having issues like brain fog, anxiety, heart palpitations, trouble sleeping, emotional mood swings. You get fatigued really fast in your workout. It's kind of ironic because when people have extreme fatigue in a workout, they think it's because of too much magnesium. And it actually is a magnesium deficiency because when you work out, you deplete your body of magnesium. And so when there's nothing left in the magnesium stores during a workout, you'll start to notice like weird things like, oh, your grip is starting to go off a little bit, or your aerobic capacity, the output of aerobic capacity isn't quite as strong, or you're not getting full rest and recovery. Like a lot of these things represent magnesium deficiency. But again, you don't know this unless you start to look at your nutrition and learn your body. Typically, if you do have any kind of deficiency, it'll show up at least mildly on a blood report. And I mean, I don't ever like telling you guys to Google stuff because that's probably one of the worst things you can do, because more than likely by the time you're done Googling something, WebMD will convince you it's cancer. Let's just be honest. By the time you're done, it could start out like, I have a little bit of like this itchy thing on my arm, and you're Googling and you probably just like rubbed up against something that caused an allergy. You start Googling things and then WebMD's like, yep, it's skin cancer. You're going to die. Sorry. It's like, I thought I just had this rash. Like, what is going on? So don't Google, but you could, and you'll just see a lot of information on how important that is for brain function, for sleep, and for muscle repair and recovery. So kind of going back a little bit, when it comes to supplementation and deciding whether or not you need to do it, step one, get your blood work. Your blood work doesn't lie. It'll tell you exactly what is going on in your body. Do not just go buy something because you saw some ad and some fitness influencer is telling you it's the greatest thing in the world. Do your education on yourself, check in with your body, and decide if it's really what you need or not. Because a lot of times people are taking way too many supplements that aren't actually doing anything, and it's causing more harm because a lot of the supplements that are out there are full of toxins and chemicals and things that create more problems than they solve. So do your blood work. And the best way to get your blood work done is if you look for functional labs. So functional lab work it's kind of like the baseline of what you do for traditional doctors. However, functional looks to see, like, for example, if they're testing your iron levels in your blood, traditional, they test it just to make sure there's no red flags immediately. Functional, they take a look at your reserves too. So you have iron stores that you use throughout the day, and then you have reserve stores that are like basically your golden nuggets of they make sure that you never run out. So functional labs will test what you also have in reserves, because sometimes things don't show up just from traditional labs. So you want to get your blood work done. You want to check that. Second thing you can do though is just take a look at how you feel in your body. Notice if there's any correlations. Do you feel better in the morning? Do you feel better at night? Is there a time during the day where you start to have an onset of weird fatigue, weird brain fog? You start to feel a little bit off. You can't think as well. Maybe you get a little bit of emotional, whatever it is, and start tracking these things and see if you don't notice with food. And this is, I'm not going to talk about food sensitivities, but that happens too. When people talk about like they get weird symptoms like that, first thing I'm like, track what you're eating and start to notice if there's any dots that connect, that when you eat certain foods, within 30 minutes to an hour, you start to have these weird symptoms, because normally the body doesn't always respond with, like, people think if they have a food allergy, it's like you go into anaphylactic shock, and sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it's just like weird stuff that doesn't even make sense. So you track those things, start paying attention to your food. After that, pay attention for like a week or so with your nutrition of what you're eating regularly. And instead of listening to some auto-generated calculator that's out there, or what somebody else is eating for their nutrition and their diet. Listen to your body. How do you feel? Do you feel tired and emotional and unmotivated all the time? You probably need more carbohydrates. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, I'm not a doctor again. Obviously, there can be other things going on, but like, are you under eating? Because if you're under eating, yeah, your body is going to feel like crap and you're going to feel it mentally and emotionally. And this comes up all the time, more so with women than it does with men. When I'm working with women and I'm looking at their nutrition and I'm like, holy crap, you are way under eating. You're like 100 grams below where you need to be in carbohydrates and in protein. First thing that comes up is the fear of, yeah, but if I eat more, I'm scared I'm going to gain weight or I'm going to get fat. And I'm like, please trust me. If you do this for a week and you don't feel better mentally, emotionally, and physically in the week, then you're allowed to stop. But I need you to consume like an extra 500 to 600 calories a day and like an extra 100 grams of carbs. And every single time I always ask, I'm like, please don't weigh yourself. You're probably going to do it, but I'm going to ask anyways, please don't weigh yourself. But every single time they're like, okay, but like, this seems like a lot of food. And they start eating it and they're like, oh, actually, I don't feel as emotional anymore. I'm getting more carbohydrates. And yeah, I weighed myself, but I didn't gain any weight. It's like, yeah, your body was letting you know that you're underfueled. And the same thing goes for men. Men tend to do it more so as they get plenty of protein, but you might be severely lacking in your healthy carbohydrates and your healthy fats. But it's the mindset of like, oh, I want to put on lean muscle, so let me just eat more protein, but forget about the rest of the macronutrients. And the reality of that is like, oh, do you have trouble staying clear and like energized all day long? It's because your brain uses carbohydrates. And if you're getting it from bread and pasta and processed sources, that's just going to turn into sugar, which is then going to spike your insulin, and you're going to feel that crash and that low energy again later. So track your food and pay attention. If you don't want to work with me to help you, become your own detective on your body and start noticing like, all right, the days that I ate more complex carbs, so complex carbs being oatmeal, quinoa, brown rice, starchy vegetables, fruits, and I'm not talking pineapple, I'm talking like bananas and berries and apples. The days you eat that, do you feel a little bit better? From that point, if you have done all of that and you've cleaned all that up and you still have a little bit of stuff going on, then that's when you start to look at supplementation. And it's very, again, personal because it depends. There's different things that different people need that you might not be able to get enough of it from food sources. So like I already mentioned, for me, magnesium is a huge thing, and I eat a ton of magnesium-rich food. I eat a ton of salmon. I eat a lot of healthy fats, which are in oatmeal, which is full of magnesium. But because I sweat and I train hard, I constantly am depleted. So I have to supplement with a pretty large amount of magnesium to keep my body regulated. It's the same thing with iron and omegas, but from an even deeper perspective, certain people, and again, using myself, if you tend to have a lot of allergies, so this is kind of like twofold, but if you tend to have a lot of allergies or inflammation in the body or food sensitivities, that can actually be caused from it's a part of the liver that helps break down histamines in the body. Some people, their body just doesn't break down histamines quite as well as other people. And so there's different forms of supplementations you have to have. So, for example, I know this is a lot of information. I'm giving it to you because it's probably going to overwhelm you, which is, I'm not here to like give you specific advice directly to you on this podcast because I can't do that because one, I haven't seen your lab work. I don't know what you're eating and I don't really know all the details of what you're trying to do. But I'm sharing this just to give examples so you can understand how complex nutrition is and to stop using just something you Googled and found on somebody else's website. And that's also why recently, another rabbit trail, I'll come back to what I was saying. Recently, somebody told me, as a customer, somebody who she said she eats my abs protein pancakes every morning. Shout out to you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I eat them every day too. But she was saying that she's like, what else do you eat? Like you should do like a daily food vlog, like, here's what I eat in a day. And I told her, I said, you know what? I don't do that because I know exactly what would happen is I would tell you that, and then you would go eat the exact same thing for yourself thinking you need the same thing, but you need something totally different than what I need. So that's actually why I don't do anything like that, because that's what you're already doing, is you're eating based on somebody else's body's needs and not yours. So instead, I would rather educate you on information like this, and you start to learn and become more self-aware with your own body, so that when you do start to feel a little bit off, or when you are feeling great, you can make the connection of what's working and what's not working, because every single body is different. Ectomorphs have to eat totally different than mesomorphs. People in their 30s have to eat totally different than people in their 50s. Men have to eat totally different than women. Like, it's not that simple. But anyway, so different forms too. Talking about magnesium is, there's so many, a lot of people just like, oh, magnesium, let me just go buy some. Don't do that, because there's different forms that do different things. And I may have talked about this, but whatever. It's been a few months. I don't remember what I last talked about. So you have like magnesium citrate, which is one of the most highly bioavailable forms of magnesium. And all that means is it's the best form your body can digest. However, if you have a sensitive stomach, you can't take magnesium citrate. Then you have magnesium threonate, which breaks the blood-brain barrier to help with mental cognitive energy. Then you have magnesium oxide, which is one of the cheapest ones that actually they use for helping people with bowel issues. Like, there's so many forms of so many different supplements. You can't just go buy something without knowing what exactly you need it for and what your body needs. The same thing with B vitamins. A lot of people just take a B complex. Personally, I do not like anything, like, I don't like multivitamins, and I don't like complexes and things that have a whole bunch of ingredients in it, because you don't know what's working and what's not working. Where if you just take one thing in the specific form that your body needs, then you know immediately, like, oh, it was a B6 thing or a vitamin D thing, or it was my omegas. It's that simple. Instead of taking something that's got 40 ingredients and you're like, I don't really know what's working, so let me just take this multivitamin and just go about my day, but you're never actually feeling better. So again, with the different forms, B vitamins, you can't just take a complex, because there's different forms of B. So a lot of people take B vitamins and complexes, and they actually get a little bit queasy and nauseous, because there's something, it's the MTHFR gene mutation that, again, 40-50% of people have, where your body can't break down that form of a B vitamin because it's not methylated to be metabolized through the body. So instead, you take this B complex, you get kind of queasy and nauseous. Your pee turns bright yellow because it just pees it right out because it couldn't digest or process any of it, and you're still not feeling any better. You probably don't need all those B vitamins anyways. B12 is one thing. B6 is used for histamine synthesis in a specific form, not just any B6, but also for serotonin production. B1 thiamine is used for something totally different. So if anything you take from this with the supplements and not supplementing, like, do not go out and just buy something based on an advertisement or something you just saw, or because it's like men's multivitamin, women's multivitamin, feel your best. That's crap. More than likely, there might be a few things in there your body needs, but you probably don't need all of that. So when deciding what you want to supplement, you want to first make sure it's something that you even need to begin with. To recap, number one, go get your blood work, go get functional labs done to get a full detailed analysis of what is going on in your body. That will tell you everything that you need to know, from where you might be deficient to where you need to make adjustments. After you have your lab work, number two, track your nutrition in MyFitnessPal or whatever you want to use for a week or two, and pay attention to your carbs, your fats, and your protein. And you can play around with this. See if you feel better eating more carbs and less protein, or more protein and less carbs, and figure out the timing of your nutrition, of when you need it. You need to be eating first thing in the morning within 30 minutes of waking up, and you need to have a very high quality protein source within 30 minutes right after your workout. That's non-negotiable. That's everybody, men, women, I don't care how old you are. That keeps cortisol levels down, it stabilizes blood sugar, and it immediately helps with your metabolism, so your body doesn't go into a catabolic state where it starts to eat up your muscle tissue. Play around with that. Then after you start doing that, if there are small adjustments that need help with supplementation, then you educate yourself on the different forms, or you come work with me and I will help you with that. And then you can decide if you need that. I know that was a lot of information. I want to give you a lot of information because I want you to be aware and have the education so that you can make the best decisions for yourself and not just listen to somebody else. That's what blows my mind, is how many times I hear about people going to a doctor or they saw something about a weight loss pill or whatever, and they're listening to everybody else about what to do with their body, but they're not taking the time to educate themselves. Nobody is going to care more about your health and your fitness and your nutrition and your well-being than you, because you are the one that has to experience when you feel good and when you feel like crap. So you have to take the time to get the education. And even if you have to work a little bit with a professional to help educate you so that you can learn your body, that's the best thing you can do in the long run, so that you're not just taking in whatever somebody else says. And I actually had this experience when I first visited a naturopath, and my friends have heard me share this story. But so the first time I saw a naturopath was in 2020, and we did my blood work, and she's going through all this stuff, and she's great. She does a great job. She's just not experienced in athletic and active individuals and how the body and the nutrition is a little bit different. So she's going through them and she's telling me I have a vitamin D deficiency. Honestly, I'm not shocked because that's just common for almost everybody. She's telling me my omegas, my fatty acids are a little bit off. Again, not shocked. And a couple other things that came up. So then we do my hormone panel, and it was all over the place. And she's like prescribing me all these supplements and DHEA and CoQ10 and adrenal this. And like, it was so much. And I'm like, this is a lot. This is weird. So we go through this whole process, and I'm not big on it. Even if somebody gives it to me, I'm like, I don't know. Let me feel this out. Like, if it feels off, I'm not taking it. If it feels, going back to being like highly sensitive, usually I'll like put something in my hand. Like I'll take the bottle of the supplement, put it in my hand and just be like, how does it feel? Nope, not taking that one. That doesn't feel right. This one feels good. Okay, I'll take that. So I was kind of doing that. And a few months had gone by and I was not feeling any better. And I was getting super frustrated. And I was like, this is annoying. You give me all these supplements and like nothing is happening. So I kind of just took all this time to educate myself even further, because your body changes about every 10 years. Physiologically, you cannot continue to consume the same foods and get the same results that you did 10 years ago. Not in a bad way. It's just your physiology changes. Your shape changes. What your body needs and doesn't need changes. So it's been this education process from like, all right, you have to figure out like what works now for training. Like I can't train 5 days a week in a row. I have to do like 3 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, and then another day off. I used to be able to do 5 days in a row, but it's just different. So I'm doing all this education on my body, and I'm seeing this naturopath just for my normal annual exams and all this stuff. And she's talking to me about like, well, you should try supplementing this and maybe try doing this. And I asked her, I was like, I have a question. How come you never, on all the blood work we did, why did you never test my magnesium levels? That's one of the first things that female athletes and male athletes that are highly active get deficient in. And when they get deficient in, it causes their immune system to overreact, which increases increases histamines and can cause inflammation. It can cause poor muscle recovery, cortisol, all these things. But you never tested me for magnesium. You gave me all these supplements and you never tested that. And her response, she was like, well, magnesium's hard to detect. I was like, well, yeah, but if you did a simple test and it showed even a little bit of a deficiency, we could have started there. The second thing was too, during this entire process, I was shocked because there was like several different people that I met with. Not one person asked me about my nutrition. Not one. These are natural doctors. And I know traditional doctors don't ask that too. And I was like, how do you sit here? And I'm like, in my mind, I see all this going on and I'm like, why is nobody asking me about like carbohydrates, protein intake? Am I getting enough of my vitamins and minerals and fatty acids from my food? Let's take a look at that and then break it down. And I was blown away. So when I hear more and more people that just start taking supplements, God, am I talking today? It's because it's the first one. I haven't done this in a while, so maybe I'm a little rusty, but it's fine. We'll get through this. But so when people talk about that and they're like, yeah, my doctor, who's a holistic doctor, told me to do this. I'm like, did that doctor even look at the nutrition and what you're eating? Almost every time it's like, well, no. What world do we live in that the number one source of our fuel and our vitamins and our minerals and energy comes from food, yet when there is something going on in the body, nobody looks at that? Like, that blows my mind. So that's why I'm telling you, number one, get your blood work and whatever it says, take a look at your food, and then you'll know what's going on. And it's the same thing when people tell me about like pains and aches in the body and they see doctor after doctor, and then the doctor tells them they need surgery. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on? Your shoulder, you have issues with your shoulder? All right, let's just try. Give me 1 week. Do these exercises and tell me if the pain doesn't start to go away, because 90% of those things are muscular imbalances. It's when you have a muscle that's overcompensating for a weaker muscle. So you fix it by strengthening the weak one and stretching out the stronger one to put balance back in the body. But it's like, it's crazy. Like, oh, we'll just stick you into surgery and maybe that'll fix it. And then of course, what happens 2 to 3 years later, same problem comes up because nothing's been fixed. It was just a temporary relief. So educate yourself. If you want to work with me, I am more than happy to go on these education rants with you specific to your body to help you feel better, to take a look at your nutrition, to see what's going on and help you make adjustments so that in the long run, you become the best doctor for your body. You become the person who knows your body better than anybody else so that you can navigate things how you want to feel. If you start to feel like crap, you go right to your food and you're like, oh, makes sense. I was under eating for 3 days. So of course I had less energy and I felt more fatigued and I didn't sleep well. I had higher cortisol, etc. So if you want help, go to ashleydrummons.com and I would be more than happy to help you. Most importantly, I just hope that you digest all this and take the time to really just think about all this before you go running to any nutrition or supplement shop so that you can feel your best from the most natural way possible. All right, that is enough. That was a lot for season 2, episode number 1. I love doing this with you guys. Thank you for all the messages and for listening. And yeah, 2022, I feel like it's going to be a really good year. I'm such a feeler. I feel everything. It's going to be a good year. Feels good to me. So this is a great way to start it. Now, go take care of your health and fitness. If you haven't already, subscribe because I'm pretty sure there'll be more episodes coming out. Until then, see you in the next episode.